I was a little surprised last night at how the game got out of hand really, really quickly. 114-88. Oklahoma City takes a 1-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals. It was a 4-point game at halftime. And Julius Randle was hitting every single catch and shoot shot of his life to the point where I'm like, oh, he's going into free agency this summer. He is declining that player option and getting all of his money. And then the second half happens where you just look up and you're like, Jay McDaniels, foul trouble. None of the Minnesota Timberwolves can shoot. Like, what was the thing that struck to you the most out of last night?
I think it was the ability of Oklahoma City to prevent the Wolves from really getting into the paint, whether it was first line, drive, defense, because that's what the Wolves like to do, break you down, get into the paint, and whether that's to score in the paint or to initiate ball movement, get open looks, in rhythm threes. I thought in the first half the Wolves were getting some of that, and like you said, Julius was doing a great job of just knocking stuff down that was available. Oklahoma City tilts their defense a little bit towards him, I think more in the second half, and the Wolves supporting cast was just flat out missing shots, whether it was open looks that were good looks or I thought in the second half, a lot of their stuff was forced. I thought they were trying to make stuff happen. And you just kind of see an avalanche effect kind of happening of nobody's hitting shots. So I'm going to try to hit a shot and break us out of this. I'm going to try to do something. And that's when the Wolves are at their worst. And that's when the Thunder are capitalizing and at your best when they kind of smell that weakness in you as an opponent.
Look, I thought not just the 4-point lead, but the style of play, right? Oklahoma City likes to turn you over. It's very clear and very evident that Minnesota has said, I've heard Chris Finch say it almost to some degree, their set offense isn't that great. If we can play against a set defense against them, we have a really good chance because they've got one scorer and a bunch of guys who are wild cards. But the second you start getting the turnovers, they start coming fast and quick. And I think the strategy became, if we driving into the lane, we're going to get it stripped. So how about we just stay out here and launch threes? And I think those two things were correlated, the turnovers and the 51 3-point shots. Well, I think like 60% of their shots came from three. And I just didn't like most of the looks, even though they were open.
Yeah, that shot diet, it was stark. Like, I think I saw somewhere that was like a record for a Western Conference Finals game, the number of threes that they were hoisting. I know that's the game plan. That's how they're probably going to have to beat the Thunder is by shooting well. But to your point about the supporting cast, the Thunder supporting cast showed up in the second half last night. J-Dub got going a little bit. I remember Kenrich Williams even having a couple buckets in a key stretch. And it's like, at the same time, Naz Reid was like 1 for 8 or 1 for 9. He finished 1 for 11. Dante DiVincenzo was struggling to get going. Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Like, if the Wolves are going to win this series, they need that bench, that depth that they like to brag about and talk about having 8 starters. They need to show up in the Western Conference Finals. You're not going to win. They were able to kind of win those 2 series against the Lakers and Warriors with kind of fluctuating performances from their supporting cast. That's not going to be the case this time around. If they're going to win, they need that supporting cast to produce because of all the attention that Ant is going to get, that Randall is also going to get at various times. And, Jaden McDaniels, I thought one of the sneaky things that went haywire for the Wolves last night was his foul trouble, because Jaden has been great at both ends of the floor for them this postseason, not just the defensive end. And I thought not having his offense was, especially on a night when everybody else was struggling, was just as impactful of a loss as his defense was.
Chris, the second he picked up that 4th foul early in the third quarter, it was almost like nothing went right after that. And what happens with a guy like that is, I said it in my last podcast, and I was saying it from a romantic point of view, so to speak. I want Ant to guard Shai. I want Shai to guard Ant. Like, that's the basketball we kind of grew up watching. But when you have all-world defenders, Lou Dort, Jalen Williams, Jaden McDaniels, of course you're going to have those guys guard the main guys. But Jaden McDaniels is the guy to me that is, how do I put this? Like the young Kawhi Leonard type of player for them, where, oh yeah, Ant is the guy, Julius Randle's Julius Randle has emerged in the space, but Jaden McDaniels is like this glue, this underutilized sort of commodity that if they are to win this series, he's going to be the guy that everybody's like, man, I didn't realize how good, how great he was, especially on defense. I think you found out, Chris, how much they need him in this series because it went haywire the second that he exited the game.
100%. And some of that was, I think, the team's also just frustration with the whistle that Shai was getting.
Yeah.
After the game, they said all the right things, but you could clearly see just in the way that they were reacting to every call, just how much that was frustrating them last night, and specifically with Jaden. I thought the moment of the game, kind of the play that summed everything up, was the sixth foul that Jaden got late when I think Shai, he falls over, gets the 3-point play, the bucket goes, Jaden gets called for the foul. And I'm kind of looking at the replays. Jaden really didn't make much contact with him, if we're being honest here, and it was just Shai falling over. And you could just see him as he stormed off the court, just the frustration that was setting in. And that was the second half to a T right there. Mm-hmm. And listen, the Wolves were cognizant of this coming in. It's something they're going to have to watch. It's something they're going to have to manage. I think there was a similar vibe entering the Lakers series about the whistle that LeBron and Luka were going to get, and so they were mentally preparing themselves for that. They have to go back to that that they had in that Lakers series, because they did handle that well, and they did kind of get through that series without losing their composure when it came to the officiating. Last night was a return to kind of the Wolves I've seen from time to time, where they let the officiating get the best of them. As dubious as some of the calls may have been, you just can't afford to let that affect your composure in the Western Conference Finals. And Jaden specifically, he's a player that runs very hot. He plays with a lot of emotion. He's done a very good job this year, I think, of controlling things. He doesn't commit as many frustration fouls. He keeps his emotions in check much better than he ever has at any point in his career. But last night, I think, if anything, it served as a reminder and a wake-up call for the Wolves to get their minds in the right place, because if they just want to complain about the officiating the whole time, they will, but they'll end up losing the series at the same time.
That's the thing that jumped out to me. One of the things that jumped out to me last night was how on edge Minnesota was about the officiating. As early as like the first 3 or 4 minutes, like you saw Mike Conley, who's the most mild-mannered, never getting a tech guy, frustrated that they didn't didn't get a timeout in. Like Julius Randle always runs hot and is always barking at the refs. He was so frustrated with Shai, threw the ball at him, got a technical foul called. Like, you can tell that it's a point of emphasis for them, that they've watched a lot of film. They haven't played, for people who don't know, they haven't played since February 28th, I believe. And right. Julius Randle did not play in that game. I don't think he played in 3 of their 4 matchups. So this is a kind of a filling out process, but it just felt like they were so focused on, man, Shai gonna trip and fall the second that he feels any level of contact, while we're getting mauled on the other end of the floor. To some degree, I understand the frustration, but like you said, you got to be able to play through it. You got to know where you are, and where Oklahoma City has sort of created a reputation in a positive way for how they can play with the officiating.
Yeah, that's everything you said, by the way, that happened in the first quarter. That was like the first 6 minutes of the game. It just set the tone. It was crazy to see, because it went from like 0 to 100 right away.
Real quick.
When it came to real quick. And I think Shai had like 7 free throws in the first 6 minutes of the game. And you just saw it was right then and there. In the second quarter, I think it flipped a little bit, where they weren't calling a lot of stuff. Shai was like, 2 for 13 at the half?
Yep.
And he was getting frustrated with the officiating. But then I just think in the second half, like, he started getting the calls. Like, the Wolves were just a step slow on defense. And when you're a step slow against Shai, that's when he's gonna make you pay, and he is gonna be able to draw that contact a little easier. The Wolves were playing better defense in the second quarter, and so I think they were in better position, and therefore getting the benefit of the whistle for that 12 minutes. So if you're them today, you go back to that film and say, look, this second quarter is the blueprint for how we should guard him and the team moving forward. You just got to put it together for 48 minutes. But yeah, that first quarter really set the tone. And I wonder how much of that was intentional on Ant's part too, to maybe set the tone a little bit with that. You remember
was
in the
he
Lakers
trying to get into Shai's head a little bit?
Maybe a little bit, right? Remember when in the Lakers series, he was pushing LeBron and he got a foul called after like pushing him for like 10 seconds in a row. He did that a little bit with Shai last night too. I think it was like at the end of the first half.
Yeah,
like there was that moment where they got like tangled up and Ant was just like shoving him, and finally the official called a foul, which he probably could have called at any point during that sequence.
Yep.
But I noticed a little bit of that last night on Ant's part, just to maybe try to set that tone of, listen, we're gonna push you around. We don't. In some ways, we don't care what the officials call. We're gonna be physical with you up and down the floor.
It was funny. It was like, I think it was the end of the first set. It was one of those inbound passes in front of Oklahoma City's bench. Shai and Ant get tangled up. Shai goes to the floor. Ant just kind of not quite stands over him, but it was kind of like a wrestler in a way, after dropping a rock bottom or something like that on somewhere. That's like 20 years old, but I'm not. That's as far as I'm going for y'all. All right,
I get the reference.
He drops a wrestling move, like stands over on him, Chris, pushes him again, and then finally the ref is like, okay, Ant, I'll let you get away with 2. I'll let you get away with 3. You can't do this in front of me. But I feel like you said Ant was doing that intentionally and was willing to take a foul to kind of set some level of tone there.
And it was funny. Ant was complaining to the official after the play, and I could see like the ref was like kind of animated in his description to Ant, like essentially, like, what do you want me to do here? Like, you were pushing him like for 5 straight seconds. Like, I gotta call something, right? And Ant, I think, was trying to make the case that Shai fouled him first or whatever like that. But the Wolves have had a complicated relationship with the officiating. This is nothing new for them. They are a team that does complain a lot. They generally, I don't think, feel like they get a fair whistle overall. Ant has had his moments, obviously, with the number of technical fouls he had this season. That's obviously gone down of late in the playoffs. But, overall, I think and listen, you can't have it both ways. Like, if you want the refs to allow physicality on one end of the floor, then you got to be willing to put up with it at the other end of the floor in the way that Oklahoma City plays defense. So how do you want the series to be called? Do you want it to be called a little more closer and by the book, or do you want the physicality to be allowed? Because if that's the case, then the Thunder are going to push you around pretty well too. Yep. So which way do you want it to be?
Stocky group. That Jalen Williams and Lou Dort and Shai's little on the skinny side, but the rest of those dudes are. I know Chet is skinny, but Isaiah Hartenstein is a mountain of a man. Like, you've got a bunch of dudes there that probably have no problem playing you in a physical style. Now, as we spin it forward to game 2 on Thursday, I don't know if I see a drastic turnaround other than, we're going to keep shooting these shots and we're going to make these shots. I think they have to find a way to get Ant out on the open floor, maybe force some turnovers. That's where the physicality can help you. But I think they got to get Ant the ball in different places, and he just can't be staring at a wall of defenders at the top of the key. You're playing right into their hands.
Yeah, and I think we heard a little bit of what their solution may be when Ant was saying playing a little more off the ball. He did that, I think, effectively, especially in games 3 and 4 of the Warriors series.
Yeah,
that's how he got going in that, and that's how they basically won that series was Ant, kind of Julius having the ball in his hands, Ant operating off the ball, having different guys break down the defense and make plays out of that. That's obviously where Julius had such a big imprint, and the chemistry between them was evident in that series. Going to be a little tougher this time around with the size and OKC's ability to pack the paint. Golden State couldn't do that as effectively with their lack of size.
Right.
And just having Mike Conley probe the defense, having, even Jaden taking people off the dribble from time to time, like having other guys kind of get into the teeth of that defense to have it shift around a little bit, and then having Ant be the guy that's getting the swing pass,
right,
instead of initiating the swing pass. that might be one of the adjustments the Wolves make coming into game 2. And, we'll see if the Thunder anticipate it, if they have a response to it. But also at the end of the day, like in that first half, I was sitting there thinking, the Wolves were up by 8 or 9 in the first half, and they did have a number of good looks. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, if they hit 2 or 3 of these, this is a whole different game.
Right,
they're up 15, 18. They had moments in that first half where if Dante or Nikhil had hit a couple of shots, that game could have been, double digits,
drastically
even
different.
close to 20, at some points. That's what they have to hang their hats on going into game 2.
Look, it's important for me to say this. Last series, Naz Reid, Nikhil Alexander-Walker. I think Naz Reid shot 46 from 3. Nikhil Alexander-Walker shot 45 from 3. Dante hasn't shot well the entire playoffs. He's hit big shots. He just, maybe timely shots. He just hasn't been consistent on shooting. Last night, those 3 guys, 5 for 28. Yep. You're not winning a damn thing playing like that. You're not beating Golden State if you're shooting like that, let alone the team with that won 68 games.